listening to Wake Up Hollywood with Nikki Korula and Eddie Pence, right here on LA Talk Radio.
Wake Up Hollywood, this is your host with the most, Nikki Korula. We have a very special guest that we're very happy to introduce you all to. Please welcome Purvi Mehta. How are you, Purvi?
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. So, you know what? We recently connected with this Indians and Entertainment group that I just love. And you know what? Where did you grow up? Where did you kind of like start adult life in the U.S.? You know, like where did you grow up?
Yeah, so I actually grew up in Florida, West Palm Beach, Florida. Yeah. But I was born in India. I don't have an accent, so.
Awesome. Where in India? Where in India were you born?
Yeah, so I'm Gujarati. I was born in Rajkot, India.
Okay.
And when I was about 6 years old, my family moved over to the States and been here ever since.
So when you must have been in second grade, is that right?
6 years old, yeah, maybe like first grade. So here, I think there's like like in India, the schooling system is really interesting. Actually, in India, I was far ahead.
Wow.
I was in like third or fourth grade when I was.
Wow, at 6 years old, that's crazy. Yeah. That's amazing.
I knew like how to write all the alphabet, all the numbers, even in Gujarat, like in Gujarati, I knew how to write everything. Wow. But then I moved here, and they put me in first grade.
Wow. Why is that? Probably because your age. They, you know what? Sometimes they just do that.
Yeah.
Did you have like a little bit of a transition? There must have been a little bit of a transition. Tell me what you remember. I mean, it's a while.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't speak English, even though my parents put me in an English-speaking school in India. My dad always had the dream to come to America and raise us here and have us go to school here. So he's like, well, I just want to put all our kids in an English-speaking school where they teach English, so that when the time comes, we can, they'll be prepared. So he had a vision already. So he put. I have two siblings. I have an older sister and a younger brother. But yeah, like they put me in first grade and put my brother in kindergarten. He's a year younger. He's 5. He was 5 at the time. And and actually we were in New Jersey for 5 years. So I guess that's
you were in Jersey first? You went to Jersey first?
Yeah.
How did your dad choose where to go first? Was it just like job opportunities, or was he like, we're going to start in Jersey and make our way to Florida?
Yeah. It was mostly job opportunity. The funny thing is, so my aunt owned property, like, motel business in New Jersey. And she had purchased the hotel, and she didn't, it was just her and her husband, and they had multiple. So she was like, hey, why don't you, told my dad, like, why don't you come to the States and run this motel? So he thought, okay, it's a good opportunity to get my foot into the door to get into the States. But to be honest, like we were never meant, like my family was never meant to come to the States. It was the luck of God that really brought us here, because he hated the States. So he came back to India.
Because it was just a culture shock, or what?
It was a culture shock. He was by himself. He like tough. The food, everything was so different. Yeah. So then my aunt was like, no, come back. You'll get used to it. And then he's like, well, I don't want to come without my family. And so, she tried to, petition for all of us to come, but there was just like, all the immigration issues and everything. Yeah. So, we were never supposed to be here. And then bringing 5 people into the States is tough, like just, vouching for 5 people, more than just like 1 or 2, was tough. And then I think one day my dad just went to immigration with my mom and they just tried. And I guess the guy at the immigration was super sweet and he's like, okay, just go. And he just like
Wow.
stamped their papers.
That's amazing. But you know what? That's kind of the American dream right there. It's like you don't know what, this country can offer, but everybody hears about it and puts it on a pedestal. So the fact that your family tried and it worked, I mean,
Yeah.
that probably wouldn't happen now, so it's amazing. And then were you guys excited as kids, or did you not know the difference initially? Like, how was that? Because that had to be a crazy transition. I remember some of that because we came from, I was born in Canada. My
Mhm.
brother was born in India. He was born in
Mhm.
Madras. And we came to Canada. And I don't remember Canada that much, but I remember we went to Nova Scotia, and then we went to Tennessee. And then
Mm.
from Tennessee, we went to California. So I remember the Tennessee, a little bit of Nova Scotia, and I remember all of California. So, but I remember it being a little bit of a transition just because, all the kids don't look like you. All the kids don't come from that same kind of culture. They don't eat the same foods. So like everything becomes, oh, you're different. So how was that transition for you, even as a 6-year-old?
Mhm. Yeah. So, moving to New Jersey back in the 80s, and I guess I'll, it tells you my age, back in the 80s, but
That's all right. That's all right.
that's when there was a lot of discrimination. People
Right.
did not know what Indian was. We had, you know, started kind of taking over a lot of the convenience stores and kind of like that. So people were like, who are these people moving in, taking all their jobs? And there was a lot of hate. I mean, there still is, but it was really bad where they were really like beating up every Indian person. So I remember, like, I think my siblings got a little bit more of harassment and discrimination than I did. I think I don't know if I was just too young or I really blocked it out. I'm not really sure, but I don't remember being picked on. But I remember them making like generic comments. So I think that was the biggest cultural difference. Like you're like, what, I used to wear a nose ring when I was in India.
Right.
And when you're little, your parents, just like how you pierce your ears, your parents pierce your nose around the same time, like when you're a little older. So I had my nose pierced, and at the time they were like, oh, what's that in your nose, that's so gross, da da da. Or like they would call us dot heads because my mom would still wear a bindi.
Right. Right.
Now it's all cool.
Right.
Years
Right.
later. Um,
Now you have like high school kids doing it. It's like, oh yeah, chic. You know what I mean? So
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
now
you
it's
were
like,
ahead of the curve. You were ahead of the curve.
exactly. But we, like we used to get made fun of so much that my sister and I ended up taking out our nose rings and never wore them again.
Wow.
Yeah, and so there was that cultural difference. We didn't speak English really well for a little while, so we didn't really understand like what was happening.
Especially
There's
slang. Slang is a whole new language too.
Yeah, and it's funny because I think about it, and it's like it's so funny what ignorance can bring because all these kids were like my age in my school, and they weren't taught, like anything about India or other people, like other cultures,
Right.
right? And so there were some people that are very open, very sweet, very kind, but then there was a lot that were like, oh, like we don't know like what culture she is or where she's from, or it's just like a lot of discrimination. um but I think that was one of my biggest, like, I know my siblings are scarred by that. That's probably one of the things that they remember is like being harassed and
Right.
being so discriminated against while we were really
Well,
young.
I think our generation too, and like we had to adapt so much because there weren't a lot of people that looked like us. And then we were in a new country and we're the first generation. So, like,
Mhm.
our parents couldn't relate to having to adapt at such a young age into the schools and all of that and
Yeah.
become kind of like, aware of like culture. Because, like, even when you're 5 and 6, people notice how you dress, how you act, how you talk. Like, people start to get clicky, or who you're playing with on the playground, whatever it is, you start to see social interactions on
Mhm.
that level. And it's a completely different culture in India. I think in some ways India, what I love about it is it's very community based. It's
Mhm.
very kind of open door, like if people are living in an apartment complex together, they all know each other. Whereas you can live in an apartment complex here in the
Yeah.
U.S. and not know your neighbors. It's just a part of, how sometimes it works sometimes,
Yeah.
So, what's interesting, have you ever talked to your siblings about how that was traumatic for them? Because they're all at different ages and they all had different, experiences, as you all did.
Yeah, yeah. My sister was 9 at the time, and so I think for her, I think it hit her a little bit more because she understood what was going on. She was a little bit
Right.
older. My brother, he does 100% remember because he used to get bullied as he got older, like not when he was 5, but like a little older. And actually, the funny thing is, um, like I think a lot of more of the bullying happened when we moved to Florida.
Wow. Really?
Funny because there was harassment in New Jersey. I mean, we used to get chased from our bus stops.
What?
Yeah,
Really?
like right after the bus stops, like at the bus stop when we got home, our bus driver would let my brother and I out first, and then he would hold back all the kids so we can run home before the
What?
kids got off. Yeah.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Like you guys were targets.
We were targets, yeah. So I remember we had to like run. He gave us like a few minute head start because he knew what was going on. So
That is a nice bus driver that even did that. You know what I mean?
yeah,
So
yeah,
you guys definitely sat at the front of the bus. There's no way you were in the back of the bus.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we just both knew more him. I can't remember too much of it, but more him. But he used to because he used to get beat up more. I mean, they didn't beat girls up; they just made fun of us. But he would get into scuffles. So he'd be like, Purvi, get ready, we're almost there. And then we would just like run off the bus and we would run home. And we never really told our parents too much of it because we didn't want to stress them out. They were already really stressed about life, like
Right.
their cultural differences, them fitting in, them raising a family without even speaking English. It was, tough for them. So we never really told
And they're also going through their own struggles that they're not talking to you guys about because they want to put on a good front. Because, now I've talked to my parents about how they were able to adapt and the discrimination they went through. And it's like, I didn't know any of that stuff as a kid because you just think everything's hunky-dory and everything's cool. So it's interesting that, like, both sides of the family are going through these things of, like, learning to adapt into American culture, which is a smorgasbord of all cultures and should not have any kind of, like, bullying whatsoever because nobody's really native unless you're Native American to this country.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it's really odd that it's like that. But I mean, it's still kind of like that in some ways, as we know. But and then did you kind of gravitate towards education and academics? To, like, that's what most Indian kids do. We know how to excel and beat kids at their own game when it comes to academics. So tell me what subjects kind of like you started being drawn to and excelling at.
Well, like we always knew we were going to go to college and become something, right? That wasn't even an option for us.
Right.
I think like I did like science a lot. I was in a lot of science programs, a lot of science clubs. I always, ever since I was a kid, I wanted to be an attorney.
Wow.
My dad was an attorney back in India, and my grandfather was a judge. My dad's side was a judge.
So it runs in the family.
Yeah, ran in the family, and I always thought like that's what I was gonna be. And I kind of gravitated towards that kind of stuff. Also, my mom always like put on the criminal shows in the background.
Right.
Court TV was always on, and all
Right.
that. But I still gravitated towards that more than anything. Like I knew I thought about it, and I was like, I don't want to be a doctor. Every Indian is a doctor.
True.
I'm terrible at math, so there's no way anybody's going to hire me in finance.
Well, it's like engineering and medicine. Most people don't really know, but like in the Indian culture, those are the two main options that people go for because they're stable, they pay well, and that's like what you do. It's like one of those two things. So anybody that's not those two things, they're immediately black sheep in their own culture and communities. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you know that. So so you started gravitating towards academics, and did you kind of know what you wanted to do, or did you take any theater classes or any kind of like when did you get kind of hit with the bug of like wanting to act and be an actress?
Yeah, so when I was in high school, they were offering these classes, entertainment classes. They had this like huge studio that they had built out with all the, like all the props and everything. And I decided to take that class because I was like, oh, seems easy enough. It's easy, yay, whatever. But then I really started loving it. We were making commercials. We
That's
were I was every morning I was the I guess a TV host where we talk about the day, the weather, what activities are going on, and it was broadcasted throughout the entire school. So it's like a news anchor
That's awesome.
at
We had
school.
that. We had that in our school. We called it Apache News because that was our logo.
Oh, okay.
Was a Native American. So, what was the name of your news channel? Do you remember?
I can't remember.
Ah, you have to
Yeah,
go back.
oh
You have to
gosh,
post some of those clips. That's
I
awesome.
know. Yeah, yeah. So I think I really loved all of that, and I thought I was good at it, right? Like I read off the prompter, like all of it was just really fun, and I thought, oh, this is kind of cool. But I never really thought like, oh, I'm gonna be a huge actress, and like because a lot of this stuff I saw on TV was like, we watched a lot of Hindi movies, and I was like, okay, well, I'm not gonna be a Hindi, I'm not gonna be an actress, an Indian actress in a
Wait.
Bollywood movie
Why though? Why was that like not even an option?
because I thought you had to go back to India to tape it.
Well, it's different now. Probably
Yes.
back then, yes, but
Yeah.
now they have studios all over the world. Where they're doing
Right.
this.
Yeah. Now it's anything goes. But at that time, I just, really didn't think about you. You kind of think about it, but you don't really think about it. You're like, oh, that'd be cool if I was that. But then you're not like, I want to be that. Right.
Well,
Um,
and it's crazy. I don't know if you like. I was so shocked when I realized that Bollywood's bigger than Hollywood. Like most people don't realize. You hear so much about Hollywood, but Bollywood is a bigger moneymaker worldwide than Hollywood is, and that totally struck me. I was like, "What? How is this bigger?" And like, because like the production value sometimes is not as good, but
mhm.
Hollywood movies they would be bigger in American culture and but like I always kind of was like, man, this is like inbred in my culture
Mhm.
that entertainment is just part of what it is to be in our culture. You know what I mean? And it's
Yeah.
like you have a lot of different cultures also gravitating towards Bollywood movies and Hindi movies, and because it has a lot of like folklore and kind of like some of these old traditional values and stories that people keep retelling, which is cool. But
Mhm.
I like that you're like, that's not even an option. You could have been a huge Bollywood actress and you never even would have known. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I was like, when I don't speak Hindi, so I was like, okay, well, that's out because I don't even speak Hindi. Um, but like I think also when we're not raised to be an actress, or we're raised to, like you said, be in like a doctor or an attorney or something like that, like have a professional, stable job. So in my head, it was always like, well, this is fun, but I don't know if I'm gonna do this forever. Because I was in a lot of plays. I liked plays. I was also shy, but it's kind of interesting because I was shy. But then when I got in front of cameras or I did, my commercials, different commercials and stuff at school for practice, I was never shy. I thought it was like, oh, okay, it's very, cool and creative. But yeah, it's interesting. I never really thought that there was opportunity for us
Right.
in that sense, right?
Well, and the other thing too, it's like it's not in our culture, it's not really looked at as an option. You know what I mean? Because we already feel like we're outsiders in this culture, and then we come in, it's like that's not really an option to think that's a viable career. I had a very opposite situation because I started singing so young and started doing all these professional gigs because I was in LA. So
Hmm.
like I thought it was totally normal just to have these experiences and
Hmm.
my family saw this as an option because I was also making a lot of money as a kid, just
Hmm.
singing on all these recordings and doing these professional things. So it's just weird how sometimes a lot of it is just the exposure to
Hmm.
the fact that there are opportunities because there are so many opportunities in art as artists are finding and have to navigate. But it's just like it's some of it is the exposure to what the life is like and what can really be possible. So you
Hmm.
go to college and like
Hmm.
like a good Indian girl, where did you go to college and what did you major in?
So like I said, I wanted to be an attorney, and my dad kind of cut that down. Because I wanted to be a criminal prosecutor.
Oh, awesome. Go big or go home. I like it.
And my dad's like, no, you can't be that because you'll be the first to get murdered. So I'm like, that's true.
That's funny. He's watched a lot of movies.
Well, like in India, like the bad guys, they get bribed and they murder the attorney that, is the opposite attorney, trying to prosecute them. So he's seen a lot of it. Plus, when his dad was a judge, he's heard a lot of stories like, oh, so and so didn't come to court because he was murdered by the opposing team or whatever, right? So, so he's seen it. It's been in his life. So he was like, no, there's no way. And I didn't want to be, I wanted to be a prosecutor. I didn't want to be a defense. Because then I was like, oh my God, that's guilty conscience. If I know somebody's guilty, I'm going to feel so bad for the rest of my life that they're out there murdering other people.
I think about that all the time because it's like, how do people defend people knowing they're completely guilty? And they like try to like, swindle the jury to like make believe that this guy's innocent or this woman is innocent when they're totally guilty. And that's a dirty part of the business. It's like, you have to have no conscience. It's like, all right, just make it happen however possible. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, I think what they do is they look at it as just a job. It's just my job, and they take their emotions out of it. I'm not that person. I'm a very emotional person.
Yeah.
So, so I don't know, but so I decided like, okay, at that time, tech was really coming into play. There's a lot of technology, like a lot of the computers was the hottest thing. And so I thought, okay, why don't I try to get into tech? Because the good thing about tech was like there's so many different avenues you can take. You can be a programmer, you can be whatever, right? And I get bored very easily, as you'll learn about my life. I can't do one thing for the rest of my life. I just get really bored. And so that's when I kind of made the decision. I'm like, okay, well, with tech, they're, like with doctor, you specialize in one thing and then you're that for the rest of your life, right?
Correct.
And I just didn't see myself doing that forever. So then I was like, okay, let me get into computers, let me get into technology. And then that's when I started taking, all my tech classes and my,
Did you take coding? I mean, I'm sure you did tons of coding in the beginning.
Yeah.
And then how did you pivot into other parts to figure out what part of tech you wanted to be in?
Yeah. So I graduated from Florida Atlantic University in Boca. And then after I was done, I started working for a company called Lockheed Martin.
Oh, yeah. They're very well known.
Yeah. Yep. Defense company. That was my first job outside of college. But the thing is, I'd have to move to Denver, and I was like, Denver, like, can I just move to New York or somewhere fun?
It's a good option.
Right. I'm like, I don't know anybody in Denver, but I was like, look, at this time, I just need a job. I need to start getting on my feet and, just kind of get my experience. So I ended up moving to Denver and working for Lockheed. And the fun thing about Lockheed was, it's a great company, but at that time they were offering full 100% tuition and books to any school I wanted to go to.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, it's unheard of.
Yeah.
I think they realized it a little later that was very expensive and they stopped.
Yeah, right. But, like, this is not a good idea.
Yeah, we're losing a lot of money. And the thing is, we weren't binded by contract. Even if we went to school there, it was through them. We didn't have to stay. We can leave.
Right.
Wow.
So
yeah. Some companies, they're like, if we pay for your education, you have to stay with us for an X amount of time. Right. Otherwise, you have to pay it back. Luckily, I didn't. So I thought, okay, well, I've always wanted to do my MBA. That was always going to be on my, list of things to do. But I just like thinking, okay, I'll have work pay for it and, whatever. So the opportunity kind of fell in my lap and I ended up getting my MBA through a private school in Denver. And
what was the school in Denver?
It's called Regis University.
Okay. Yep. I played at a lot of colleges across the country. So I played at some tech schools in Colorado and some small schools all over and big schools. So I kind of know small schools that nobody's heard of. I'm like, I may have heard of that school. I do know Regis. Go on.
Yeah, Regis University, and I got my MBA there while working. So I actually was doing my MBA full time while working full time because I didn't want to stay in school forever. I was like, I just want to get it done with and get the degree.
So how
Uh,
did you do? Did you do night classes or something? Like, how did you kind of balance all of that?
yeah, night and weekends.
Okay.
So luckily, like my job wasn't that intense, and they knew I was going to school, so they weren't like, um, they were pretty flexible with me, and it wasn't too busy, so I was able to handle both things at the same time.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, yeah. So that totally worked out. And then I was like, after I got my MBA, I got a specialization in e-commerce because I was like, you know what? I really have a feeling online shopping and all that is going to be pretty, pretty popular eventually. So I just
Yeah.
ended up doing like an e-commerce specialization. And then like a couple months later, I kind of got bored and I'm like, okay, what am I going to do with my master's? Like, what do I want to do with it? Right. And one of my friends, she was going to school, getting her master's in cybersecurity
Hmm.
at Lockheed. So I thought about it. I'm like, well, you can do a certification or you can get a master's in cybersecurity. So I was just going to get the cert and say, I had it under my belt. But then she was like, just do your master's because it looks better. So I'm like, that's true. So,
You have two
and
master's degrees?
yeah, so I have two master's
Crazy.
degrees.
That's crazy. Okay, awesome. Awesome.
Well, that's because I was so bored in Denver.
Right. You're like, there's nothing to do. I guess I'll just do more school.
Yeah, and the funny thing is I hated school growing up, like, I
Wow.
hated school.
So did you do it at the same school then? Did you do
No, I ended up doing it at, DU, Denver University.
Okay, cool. Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And that was another 2 years that you did that?
Yeah, another 2 years, so I ended up being in Denver for about 5 years total, um, but then, yeah, the minute I was done, I was like, "I'm getting out of here, no more Denver, we're
And
done."
you're like, "Let me pivot. Let me get out of here." So did you move from Denver to LA?
I moved from Denver to San Francisco.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, Bay Area. Yeah, because I did not like Denver. Not that it's bad, but I just felt, like the diversity was very low. They didn't have a lot of diversity.
Yeah.
I'm not a really outdoorsy person. Like I'll hike once in a while, but I don't go mountain biking and kayak. I don't do a lot of that
That's
stuff.
the place for all of that.
Yeah.
Snowboarding, skiing, all of that too, right?
And once in a while it's totally fun, but like a lot of people do it a lot. And I'm like,
Yes.
that's not really me. Um, and a lot of my friends had moved out. They had gone to Chicago or other places. So like, my circle was kind of getting small too. So then my sister lived in San Francisco and was like, why don't you just move here? It's a tech hub.
Right.
And I was like, oh, that's true. So I ended up moving to San Francisco.
And you've been working for Google did you start at Google in San Francisco originally?
No, no. So I've been at Google for almost 2 years,
Okay.
right after the pandemic. So I was working for a lot of many companies in the last couple of years, different companies. Um,
And still
but
and it's still like what's interesting is you're still pivoting in that time, trying to figure out what works, what you like about certain things. And what was it? Was it like the workload? Was it the actual daily routine of the work that you were kind of like trying to figure out what you liked the most? Or was it just the people and the environments and like the projects you were kind of like the tasks at hand? What was like the thing that made you inspired to either move or pivot or stay with a company?
yeah, I just really didn't know what I liked. Like I was trying all these different things, and after a while, it gets monotonous,
Right.
right? Like the job gets a little monotonous, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm doing the same thing every day. I don't, like I'm kind of bored. And then once you get bored, you just don't focus anymore. And then you kind of like mentally remove yourself from the situation. Like every morning I have the same meeting with the same people. So I'm like, I'm just not enjoying it anymore. So then I try to go to a different company that has that's a different industry. So I've been in almost every industry, in finance, retail, everything. But ideally, I always knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur or like have a company of my own or just I just didn't I'm a very creative thinker, so I'm always thinking about like new gadgets and new things. I'm like, okay, how can I make my life easier and everybody else's? And so I've always been very entrepreneurial. So So I was trying to figure out, well, because I was working because I needed financial stability.
Right.
I was still trying to figure out like what my passions were, and what I like.
Were you taking like acting classes or anything like that to kind of like get the bug back, from when you had it in high school?
Yeah, so I did a little bit of modeling and acting when I was in Florida, but there was no room for my ethnicity in Florida. It was always like, yeah. I never got called. I never got, like I got very rarely would I get called for auditions and things like
That's
that.
crazy. That's
hmm
crazy. And
Yeah. So then,
were you kind of aware of it when you were going through it? Were you like, I'm seeing girls that I know I'm prettier than or more
mhm.
talented than getting calls. There's got to be some reason. Like, what were the signs that you kind of were starting to see a little bit of that?
Oh,
That's a good question. I wanted to know for my own, it's my
yeah.
own sense of soul.
Actually, I got told by a couple people that, hey, like we're not really looking for somebody with your look.
Oh man, that's so jive. I mean, that's ridiculous because I think beauty it doesn't have a look. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It's like it is one or the other. And it's like for anybody to tell you that it's just bogus. It's politics.
And I think, sometimes until somebody comes in and changes it, people are very one track minded. They've always had certain characters in a certain film. They'll always have those until somebody comes and throws a wrench in and say, no, we need to change up the characters, right? And that's when people are like, oh yeah, maybe we should start changing up characters of different ethnicities. And that's when people start thinking that way. But until somebody comes in and disrupts it, people just always do the same thing and look for the same thing. And their vision is the same. Um,
Because it's safe. That's
it's
why.
safe. It's what they know. Yeah. So, which is funny because when I was younger, I didn't look Indian. I actually looked Spanish.
Wow. And
And
there's a lot of Cuban influence from right. Yes,
yeah.
yes.
So I thought that was kind of unique. And I remember in college, one of my teachers was an actress. And she's like, hey, you should start, looking into acting more because now I think they're starting to look for people of your ethnicity. And I was like, I don't even know where to start. Like, I don't even know how to get an agent. I don't even know, like, I spend so much money already on photos. I just don't know who to send them to. There was just like no internet or any avenue unless you knew somebody.
Right. Right.
So then I kind of just squashed it a little. I'm like, okay, it's not meant to be. I'm just gonna continue doing, whatever I'm meant to be to
I'll
do.
just get a third master's degree. I mean,
Yeah, I'll just keep educating myself. Um,
that's good though. I mean, it's empowering, so it's cool.
yeah. But when I went to San Francisco, actually, it was always in the back of my mind to act and to be in commercials. I've always I see a TV and I'm like, oh man, I really wanted that life. Like, I always wanted to be an actress. I was always drama queen growing up. I just never knew how to do it. I just never knew. And so I just didn't. And so Macy's, I used to work for Macy's.com as an engineer. And they, one of my managers said, hey, Purvi, they're shooting a commercial that I think you should put your hat in for. So I was like, oh, okay, that sounds cool. So I applied for the commercial and I got the commercial for Macy's.
Wow.
And I remember shooting it and I was like, oh man, I remember how fun this was. Like, this was so easy for me. It just comes natural, right? And that's when I started kind of looking into it a little more. And this was in the last maybe 6-7 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And
I'm surprised, like, modeling agencies weren't sending you out for more print stuff and doing, a lot more of that because you could definitely do both. I mean, there's no question you could do both. So now are those things more like in the forefront? Are you thinking about those as possibilities as you should? Because there is a huge movement for ethnic women, brown faces, beauty as colors of all, inclusions and, are you making it more of a priority to seek out more of those opportunities now?
Yeah, I think there's more available now than there was to me at the time.
Right.
Because I think like backstage and I think there was two problems. One problem was people who wanted talent didn't know how to get the talent. They would just go to the same agents or the same agencies, or use the same people. And then on the other side, people who were talent, they didn't know how to look for opportunities, right? So unless you had a really amazing agent or you were discovered randomly, it was kind of hit or miss. Like you just didn't know where to look. Sometimes, like I remember there used to be ads in the newspaper looking for a model, but then I used to always find, like I used to always watch these shows saying, oh, somebody went from this Craigslist ad and was murdered. So I was like, okay, I don't want to get murdered from this this Craigslist ad. So you kind of,
especially for a woman, that is a very big risk. So I totally understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think with Backstage and casting networks and all those companies started popping up saying, hey, we have this problem. We need talent and talent needs us. Let's put it together and see where we can find people that fit. And so when I started looking on, I joined Backstage and I was like, oh, let me just try. I don't know what this is about. I did a Google search after Macy's commercials and I was like, how can I get involved? And Backstage came up. So I signed up for Backstage, and then I started getting a lot more hits. Like I did an Intel commercial through them. I did a lot of short films through them. So a lot more jobs started coming in. I was like, oh, okay, this is cool. Yeah.
So let's play something real quick. I love that you made this, short on the engagement. We'll call it the engagement. And you're creating opportunities by just putting yourself in things, writing things together. Here's a little sketch that you did. This is called the engagement.
So, did you hear that Josh and Kate got engaged last weekend? Heard he proposed in Paris.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. He proposed on their 2-year anniversary. I remember our 2-year anniversary. That was, 3 years ago?
Yeah, Applebee's was packed that night. Food took forever.
It did. I don't know, so I'm thinking of maybe going to get my nails done this weekend in case something exciting happens.
That's great, honey.
I like the little subtext. You're like, in case something exciting happens, it should sound like a ring, but we'll see. Awesome. So tell me what the inspiration behind that was, and tell me a little bit about the backstory about what went into creating it.
Yeah, so Mohit, he plays the boyfriend in there. I wanted to like kind of do a skit of something. And one of the biggest things that we're like, okay, I think the biggest thing between a boyfriend and girlfriend is like hinting to them that like, I'm ready for the next stage, are you, right? And sometimes, like he was like, sometimes people don't really think about it that way. Like, women throw hints all the time. Men sometimes don't read between the lines as well as women do.
It's very true. It's very true. We're very black and white, and they're like, here are all the colors.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And I also think like even if sometimes men, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, even if men see it in front of them, it just doesn't click sometimes, right?
Very true. Very
and
true.
that's why on the laptop I have you can't really see it, but I have like a page of a jewelry store with like all these rings on it.
I also like that he was like, yeah, Applebee's was packed that night. It's like, and that's such a guy thing. It's like, oh yeah, we're celebrating our anniversary. Let's go do it at a regular restaurant and just, you know what I mean? Like now that, it's easy to get comfortable. So what was really funny was like, it's cute, entertaining, and it's, an interesting perspective because it's every relationship crosses that road. So I love that you did that. Now you've been taking some stunt classes, which I think is such a cool avenue to go down because, first of all, you look like a pretty female, and then you're doing these like cartwheels and doing all this like parkour moves. So tell me what drew you to the stunts, and tell me what that experience has been like for you and how it's opening doors or how you want it to open some doors.
Yeah. So, I kind of sat down one day and I thought, okay, what would my ideal role be? Like if somebody came to me and said, Pruvi, I want you to play this role, what role would it be? And I've always loved action movies. Like
that's rare, first of all, that you're a female and love action movies.
Oh,
Awesome. It's very cool.
Yeah, I just love the adrenaline, and I love the sexy look, and I love the, the passion behind the role. And it's just so sexy to me. And so I was like, I think I want to be an action hero. Like, I know I want to be an action hero. And one of the things I also wanted to be was like Catwoman, something like Catwoman, because I feel like Catwoman is very seductive, sexy, but also a badass, right?
Yeah, powerful. She's powerful, and then she looks like she can be soft, but she's very ferocious. It's crazy.
Yeah, yep. And so, so I started doing stunts, thinking, okay, like, if I get this under my belt, then maybe I'll have more opportunities, because now I already know how to do, some of the work. I don't have to be trained on it. I'll just preliminarily do it. And it's been so much fun. I recommend everybody to do it because it's really great exercise.
Right.
It's also really fun. And so, yeah, I started doing my own stunts, and one of the trainers at the studio asked me, like, okay, what is your ideal role? Then we'll play, we'll work on that role for you. And the studio I go to work with a lot of actors that are trying to do the stunt work or be in action movies and things like that. So I told her, like, oh, like, one of the things is like Catwoman. So she's like, okay. So she's like, let me show you how to do some of the stunts that Catwoman does. And so that's kind of how, like, I learned how to do some of the stunts that the Catwoman would do in a movie. Also, like, fight scenes, because sometimes you have to, have physical fights in there and stuff, and you have to know how to react when you're being kicked, and how to kick, and how to hit somebody without actually hitting them.
I had a friend that was she was the stunt woman for Halle Berry for that movie.
Oh.
There were 6 of them, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And she said one of the hardest things was, like, Halle didn't really have to do a lot of rigorous stunts. Like, they would cut because of the insurance, because nobody wants the stars getting. So, like, a lot of times these girls would do these crazy stunts that were like dangerous, and it would look like, when they cut it together, it looked like it was Halle Berry doing all of it, because, like, you wouldn't see her face, and it would just be cut in a way that. And she was like, the cool thing was, I get to do the stunts. The shitty part of it is Halle gets all the credit for doing it, because it looks like she's doing it. You know what I mean? But I mean, she would get injured a lot. Like, she would just, like, sprain her ankle, and that's why they had so many of them, because it's not an easy thing to do. It's tough on the body, as you know. So did you have any injuries, like, when you were kind of, like, learning, like, sprained fingers or ankles or anything like that? What kind of experiences did you have?
Yeah. I hurt myself quite a bit. It is actually very, very dangerous. You're relying a lot on the people behind the scenes, because when you're strapped into a harness, there's a guy, holding a rope. So when you have to be in the air, he pulls the rope, so you're airborne.
Right.
And sometimes if they don't put the harness on correctly, it can, like, break a rib.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, or it can hurt you. So there's been times where I was kicked, and I was supposed to roll against the back of the wall, and I had to, as soon as the kick happens, I had to go, like, Superman style on the ground.
Wow.
And if I didn't go Superman style, when he pulled it, it tugged me into a hole. It would pull me against the wall.
Wow.
And so when that happened, when the person kicked me, like, fake kicked me, I didn't go fast enough for the Superman style. And so when he pulled it, I ran into the wall, and I injured my elbow.
Wow, that sounds rough. This is supposed to be a fun class.
It is.
I want to get beat up I'm going to pay you to show me how to do all these crazy stunts and get beat
injured. Up. Yeah. So I hurt my elbow pretty bad. It's fine now. It just took a little while to get back into, adjusted. And then also, like, when you're airborne, you have to fall flat on your feet and in a stance, in a fighting stance.
Right.
And sometimes when they drop you so fast that that's when you sprain your ankle, is because your feet hit the ground so fast, and if you're not prepared, you can twist it. And so that's happened too. Like, when I was doing an airborne scene, they dropped me too fast, and I wasn't ready, and I sprained my ankle.
Well, let's show a little bit of this clip. This is Catwoman.
You're dangerous. dangerous. Just get it up, the way you move, so scandalous. It's all about the two of us. Oh, one.
That'd be gratifying, just to get a little ferocity in you. Like, you don't seem like a very violent person. So like, I'm sure that part of it you had to learn. So what did they tell you in just the fighting stances and like how to be aggressive? What was some of the best advice you got for some of that?
Yeah, they just said pretend that you're Catwoman in your mind and channel her energy, channel her thoughts. And like a cat, like what a cat would do, it would have a claw. So when you're trying to, you don't want to slap her or punch her, you want to claw at the person. So they're like, when you leap, pretend like you're leaping like a cat. So that those are, we ran through it a few times. But when I was doing it, I was like, okay, how would a cat fall? And when a cat falls down, it falls on its flats, but sometimes it has one hand in front of the other, right? And so I just kind of thought about that, and I was like, okay, when I fall, I'm gonna fall flat on my hands.
And then you were running on all fours too. It was like, what?
Yeah, and that was my first time doing that stunt. It took maybe like 5 tries. So I haven't perfected it, but I was like one of the ones that.
And do you have to find like certain movements just that you gravitate towards? Maybe it's backflips, or maybe it's like landings, or is there something that kind of you felt, oh, this feels natural, I can get used to doing this? Was there something that made it more exciting just because of that?
Yeah, so a lot of times, it's not in this clip, but when you're kicking someone, you have to like really forcefully like twist your entire body and then kick. And I think for me that's easiest. But backflips are a little hard because you can injure your back if you don't flip correctly. And the whole thing again is like the person that's holding your harness, they have to know exactly when to pull you, because when you're not in position and they pull you, you can really sprain your back.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like you hear all these stories about all these celebrities getting hurt, and now you know why. It's like you know firsthand why, because it's the timing of it. It's also the agility of it, because like, let's be honest, the human body is not naturally going to do that. It has to learn how to do that. So there's a learning curve in how you kind of adapt to. Maybe it's flips, maybe it's turns and twists, maybe it's getting down on all fours and run. I mean, those aren't things that are naturally in your daily routine or even the craziest exercise routine. It's just not natural. So what was the hardest thing that you had to learn? Was it the timing, or was it just like balance, or just the endurance part of it? Because that's crazy endurance. You have to have it if you're doing something like that.
Yeah, I think timing is huge. Just knowing, when to do what. Sometimes it gets frustrating because it's like, oh my God, this should be so easy, but I can't even do a air kick. Like it should be so natural. But sometimes we get in our head and we're like, okay, I need to twist my body this way, and then I need to make sure my leg is, airborne at this point. And you're so in your head. But it's actually a very natural thing. If you're going to kick somebody, you kind of just kick someone and you don't even think about it, right? So like kind of detaching, because I think I'm an overthinker, so I'm always thinking, and my coach is always like, stop thinking and just do it. Just, like it's very natural. It's a very natural kick. And I'm like, okay, but if I don't kick exactly right here, like, you kind of start thinking, like, you have to like do this, and you're in your head more than you are in the action. And then that's what messes it up a little bit, because you're like, I should be doing this. And then you get frustrated because you're like, okay, I can't kick normal. And this is such a natural thing. But it's because most of the time we're all in our head. We want to get it perfect. And so when you're doing the kick, or when you're doing, the backflip, it's mostly like, just do it. Don't think about it.
Well, the other thing, it's like there's movement. Like a lot of people that are in these industries, they've had movement classes, or they've had dance classes, martial arts classes, or maybe it's capoeira or some kind of like dance movement. Maybe it's figure skating. You'd be surprised how a lot of these people get into these parts of the career just to understand the movement part of it, and they have, most of them are like athletes, because you have to have, I'm sure the first couple times you were like a little bit out of breath, like, oh man, this is not as easy as it looks on TV when somebody else is doing it. You know what I mean? So I'm sure there's an adjustment period and a grace period. Now, did it help you think about developing a character because you're doing these classes and now you're thinking, okay, this is what I'd want my character to do? Did you kind of start piecing things like that together, or is it something that's farther down the road for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I want to get a lot more different experiences under my belt before I'm like, okay, this is what I'm going to be good at, and this is what character I want to play. I think it's like I want to. I don't want to be a stunt woman. I want to be the main hero, but I also want to do my own stunts. And it's important because like I think when you're it's not always a stunt woman in the play. You are showcasing yourself too. A lot of times you're pretending you're fighting, and I want to do some, a lot of my own stunts.
Right.
So I'm like, I want to get as much under my belt as possible, so that like I can eventually be like, okay, I'm not good at the kicking, but I'm great at the flipping. So maybe I should do more in that area.
Well, it's interesting to see that is becoming a cool trend with female actresses, and especially pretty female actresses like Charlize Theron, Angelina Jolie. They're all doing their own stunts. Halle Berry. They're all taking these in-depth, classes or kind of like stunt regiments in their exercise programs just to know how to fall, how to hit, how to kick, how to spin, how to flip, how to land, how to do parkour moves. I always feel like parkour is like something that I wish we learned when we were like 5, because it would be such a cool way just to get around. I watch videos sometimes of people just like jumping around, but then you also see people like Tom Cruise. He'll do his own stunts all the time, and he does crazy stuff. So is there a line for you that you think, I can't do that stunt, or is it kind of all open and you're open for the adventure?
Yeah, I don't think I can do a stunt, and I haven't tried it yet, but I have a fear of it, is like maybe falling out of the window and falling on a mat, because and letting gravity kind of take place. I think I'm very afraid to things like that. I wouldn't do anything that puts my life in jeopardy.
Right.
Like flying out of the windows, or yeah, anything like that. I think that can be very hurtful, and you can get injured pretty bad on those things. But I mean, the simple things like fight scenes and jump scenes, and like just easy scenes, I think I'm more capable of.
Right.
Well, yeah, just like I know a lot of times people like jump off of a bridge and then they fall onto like a mat. I don't think that's me.
What's crazy is I've gone bungee jumping. I
Mhm.
did it in one of the highest parts in the world in Switzerland. It's 570 feet. I've done skydiving. I've jumped off the stratosphere in Vegas,
Oh wow.
and I have done cliff jumping in Italy. And I would do none of those things now. Like it's weird. Like I did all that stuff in my 20s and 30s, and now as I get older, I'm like, man, I don't think I'd do any of that stuff. Like there's no part of me that wants to do any of that stuff, and I don't know where that part was or where it disappeared, but there's something about just like, yeah, I don't know if I would do that now. So maybe it could have been something that you would have been okay with in your 20s and 30s.
Yeah.
But like for me, like now, I've done a lot of those things, and I don't think I would ever do any of that stuff now, just because it's just like, I see like clips or pictures of me doing those things. I'm like, I'm glad I did that in my younger years. I would never do that now, because I don't know if it's something in my mental state that I'm like, I'm comfortable being right at home on upright on 2 feet on land. That's cool. You know what I mean? Maybe it's a safety thing. Let's go to this court clip. Tell me a little bit about this court clip that you have.
Yeah. So the court clip, I had a friend who had just started writing court cases for reality TV, and she asked me if I wanted to be a part of it, and so I was like, okay, yeah, sounds fun. And it was, I didn't know this, like you get the scene, but everything is 100% improv.
Wow.
So yeah, so everything in this clip is improv. It's made up. There's no script. But I know that what the back end story is and how I need to react. And the back, I can give you a little bit of the back end of the story.
Yeah, please.
The story is that I was engaged to a gentleman, and for our wedding, I wanted to do a first dance. So I hired a tango teacher to teach us to dance. And in midst of me paying and getting the classes with my fiance, he ended up having an affair with the tango teacher.
Wow, with her.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Okay.
Yeah, and so I am suing the tango teacher for a refund because the purpose of her was to teach tango, not do tango with my
Yeah.
my
Yeah. That was a great little like blurb of the scene. Let's play it. Here's the court TV scene.
Wedding first dance. It is not contingent upon you guys getting married. If that were to be the case, then I'd be sued all the time.
Well, then I wouldn't take a tango lesson if it wasn't for a specific reason with my
It
fiance.
is for you, yes, but you
And
not
the
getting
contract
married is not my fault.
But the
There
contract
was already
specifies first dance.
ladies.
So let me ask you this: how did you do this without breaking and laughing? Like, how did you both? Because when you first sent it to me, I was like, "What is this? Is this true? Is this legit?"
Yeah.
So tell me, how did you not break character when you were doing that?
We practiced. Her and I practiced a little bit before the scene, and it was funny because Ashna, who had wrote the scene, she said, just be pissed. Think about like a time that you were upset with somebody or they wronged you, and just be mean to each other. So I think we got all of the, because she's my opponent is a really nice girl. She's super sweet. And we had told each other like, okay, I'm going to be really mean to you, but I'm really not a mean person.
You're like, okay, game on. Let's do this. And then how did they determine the winner? Was it just based on your improvisations with each other?
It was up to the judge. She's a real judge. And so the judge heard both the stories, both sides, and then she made the final decision. Nobody knows what her decision's going to be. She doesn't even know what her decision's going to be. It's all last minute.
Wow. And does she know that this is kind of rigged or there's a story behind it? Or she just, okay, so she knew that there was.
She's part of the reality team.
Okay.
Yeah, she's part of the show. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love it. So where can people find you if they want to cast you in something or find you online? Where can people find you, Purvi?
Yeah, I have an IMDb account. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I'm all over the place.
What's your Instagram or IMDb handle if you know it?
Yeah, so my Instagram is Purvi Everywhere. And my IMDb, I don't remember. It's probably Purvi Mehta.
Do you know what does your name mean, by the way? Do you know?
It means a sweet symphony.
Oh, that's cool. I like it. I'm like, it has to be a cool name. It just sounds so. And no relation to Zubin Mehta? Do you have any relation to Zubin Mehta?
No, I used to get asked that a lot in high school. No, just.
It could be very distant. You just don't know it yet. Maybe one day.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, he's great at music and I'm not, so maybe I'm very far.
Well, maybe your artistic genes are coming out in a different way. That's how that works.
That's true. Yep.
Purvi, thank you so much for being a guest on Wake Up Hollywood. We appreciate you so much. We look forward to more things that you're going to do. We're going to have you back on in about 10, 11 months. We want to see more sketches, more shorts, more print ads because you deserve to be in print ads. And thank you so much for being a guest on Wake Up Hollywood. We'll have to keep on following up with you and see how you're doing. I'll see you at the next meeting. Actually, I'll see you in 2 meetings, not the next one, but I'll see you in 2 meetings, okay?
Perfect. Yeah, thank you so much. Great chatting.
Of course. On behalf of Purvi, Sam, and myself, we'll see you guys next week. Take care of each other. Peace and love. Let's increase the peace. The world needs it right now. Peace and love, people. All right, we'll see you.
You're listening to Wake Up Hollywood with Nikki Korula and Eddie Pence, right here on LA Talk Radio.